Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my Let's Read of the Westing Game. This is Part 3, Chapter 7, The Westing Game. 8 card tables, each with 2 chairs, were arranged in the center of the game room. Sports equipment lined the walls. Hunting rifles, ping-pong paddles, billiard cues, a full rack, Troll noticed. Bows and arrows, darts, bats, rackets, all look like possible murder weapons to the jittery heirs who were waiting to be told where to sit. Theo wandered over to the chess table to admire the finely carved pieces. Someone had moved a white pawn. Okay, he'll play along. Theo defended the opening with a black knight. Upon hearing Plum's throat-clearing signal, Sidel Pulaski switched the painted crutch to her left armpit and flipped to a fresh page in her notebook. Shh! 7th. And now, dear friends, relatives, and enemies, the Westing game begins. The rules are simple. Number of players, 16 divided into 8 pairs. Each pair will receive $10,000. Each pair will receive 1 set of clues. Forfeits. If any player drops out, the partner must leave the game. The pair must return the money. Absent pairs forfeit the $10,000. Their clues will be held until the next session. Players will be given 2 days' notice of the next session. Each pair may then give 1 answer. Object of the game, to win. Did you hear that, Crow? Otis Amber said excitedly. $10,000! Aren't you glad I made you come, huh? Shh! That was Turtle. The object of the game was to win, and she wanted to win. The 8th. The heirs will now be paired. When called, go to the assigned table. Your name and position will be read as signed on the receipt. It'll be up to the other players to discover who you really are. Dun dun dun! Team 1. Madam Sun Lin Hu, cook. Jake Wexler, standing or sitting when not lying down. Grace Wexler did not understand her husband's joke about position. Mr. Hu did, but he was in no mood for humor. $10,000 was at stake. Both pleaded for their absent spouses. Emergency operation. My wife doesn't even speak English. To no avail. Table 1 remained empty and penniless. Wow, what a coincidence that the two people who didn't come will both have that one, both be on the same team. I don't even know how you could predict that. 2. Turtle Wexler, witch. Flora Bomback, dressmaker. Sighs of relief greeted the naming of Turtle's partner, but Flora Bomback seemed pleased to be paired with the kicking witch. At least her face was still puckered in that elfish grin. Turtle had hoped for one of the high school seniors, especially Doug Hu. 3. Christos Theodorakis, birdwatcher. Dr. Denton Deere, intern, St. Joseph's Hospital, Department of Plastic Surgery. Do you officially have the doctor if you're just an intern? Because I'm not sure that's how that works. So he's just pompous too. Theo protested. He and his brother should be paired together. Chris was his responsibility. Mrs. Wexler protested. Dr. D should be paired with his bride-to-be. Dr. Denton Deere protested, but silently. If this had been arranged for free medical advice, they, whoever they are, were mistaken. He was a busy man. He was a doctor, not a nursemaid. But Chris was delighted to be part of the outside world. He would tell the intern about the person who limped into the Westinghouse. Maybe that was the murderer, unless his partner was the murderer. This was really exciting, even better than television. Alexander McSuthers, doorman. J.J. Ford, Judge, Appellate Division of State Supreme Court. The heirs watched the jaunty doorman pull out a chair for the judge. It never occurred to them that Sandy was a nickname for Alexander. That wouldn't be what Sam Westing meant by, it will be up to the other players to discover who you really are. Or could it? The judge did not return the chip-toothed smile. Doorman, he calls himself, and the others assigned simple things. Cook, dressmaker. The podiatrist even made fun of his position. She must seem as pompous as that intern, putting on airs with that title. Well, she'd worked hard to get where she was. Why couldn't she be proud of it? She was no token. Her record was faultless. Watch it, Josie Joe. Westing's getting to you already, and the game has barely begun. 5. Grace Winsler Wexler, heiress. James Shin Hu, restaurateur. Grace Wexler ignored the snickers. If she was not the heiress now, she would be soon, what with her clues, Angela's clues, Turtle's clues, Den's clues, and the clues of Mr. Hu's obedient son. Okay, at this point, there might as well just be a counting gag of how many times Grace Wexler says, does, or thinks something that makes me want to shoot her. $5,000 lost. Oh, well, who needs Jake anyway? She'd win on her own. You'll be happy to know that Mr. Westing was really my Uncle Sam, she whispered to a partner. So what? Thought Mr. Who. $5,000 lost. He should have told his wife about this meeting, dragged her along. Sam Westing the louse had cheated him again. Whoever killed him deserves a medal. 6. Berth Erica Crow, Good Salvation, Soup Kitchen. Otis Amber, Deliverer. The delivery boy danced a merry jig, but Crow, her sore foot squeezed back into her tight shoe, headed for table 6 with a grim face. Why were they watching her? Did they think he killed Wendy? Could the guilty know her guilt? Repent! Crow limps, Chris Theodorakis noted. 7. Theo Theodorakis, brother. Doug Who, first in all-state high school mile run. They slapped hands, and Doug jogged to table 7. Theo moved more slowly. Passing the chessboard, he saw that White had made a second move. He countered with a black pawn. Maybe he shouldn't have written brother, but like it or not, that was his position in life. Chris was smiling at him in pure sweetness, which made Theo feel even guiltier about his resentment. I guess that makes us partners, Miss Pulaski, Angela said. Pardon me, did you say something? 8. Sidel Pulaski, Secretary to the President. Angela Wexler, none. Angela stepped tentatively behind the secretary, not knowing whether to ignore the disability or to take her arm. At least her crippled partner couldn't be the murderer, but it was embarrassing being paired with such a... No, she shouldn't feel that way. It was her mother who was upset. She could feel the indignant anger without having to even look at Grace. Her perfect daughter paired with such a freak. What good luck, the howling Sidel Pulaski thought. Now she would really be noticed as such a pretty young thing for a partner. They may even invite her to the wedding. She painted her crutch white with little pink nosegays. Dr. Denton Deer was troubled. What in the world did Angela mean by none? This time he thought it was N-U-N instead of N-O-N-E. Yeah, he's kind of an idiot. Once again, Edgar Jennings Plum cleared his throat. Nasal drip, Denton Deer whispered, confiding the latest diagnosis to his partner. Chris giggled. What's the crippled kid so happy about? The intern wondered. 9th. Money! Each pair in attendance will now receive a check for the sum of $10,000. The check cannot be cashed without the signature of both partners. Spend it wisely or go for broke. May God thy gold refine. A piercing shriek suddenly reminded the Westing heirs of murder. While passing out the checks, the lawyer had stepped on Crow's sore foot. Is this legal, Judge? Sandy asked. It's not only legal, Mr. McSuthers, George Ford replied, signing her name to the check and handing it to the doorman. It's a shrewd way to keep everybody playing the game. 10th. Each pair in attendance will now receive an envelope containing a set of clues. No two sets of clues are alike. It's not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. Okay. Placing the last of the envelopes on table 8, the young lawyer smiled at Angela. Sidel Pulaski smiled back. This makes no sense, Denton Deer complained. 4 clues typed on cut squares of Westing super-strength paper towels laid on the table before him. Really? Was it just too much trouble to print them on paper? You had to do it on paper towels. I assume that the paper mill just makes copy paper. Whatever. Arms and elbows at odds, with fingers fanned, Chris tried to rearrange words in some grammatical, if not logical, order. Hey, watch it! The intern shouted as one clue wafted to the floor. Flora Bombeck leaped from her chair at the next table, picked up the square of paper, and set it face down before the trembling youngster. I didn't see it, she announced loudly. I really didn't see it, she repeated under the questioning gaze of her partner, Turtle Wexler. Which? The word that she had seen was plain. The players protected their clues more carefully now. Hunched over the tables, they moved the paper squares this way and that way, mumbling and grumbling. The murderer's name must be there, somewhere. The only pair that had not seen their clues was table 8. Sidel Pulaski placed one hand on the envelope, raised a finger to her lips, and tilted her head towards the other heirs. Just watch and listen, she meant. She may be odd, but she's smart, Angela thought. Since each pair had a different set of clues, they could watch and listen for clues to their clues. Heh. The delivery boy slapped his partner on the back. That's us, old pal. Queen Crow, and King Amber. What is this, on or no? Doug Who turned a clue upside down and then right side up again. Theo jabbed an elbow in his ribs and turned to see if anybody had heard. Angela lowered her eyes in time. J.J. Ford crumpled the clues in her fist and rose in anger. I'm sorry, Mr. McSuthers. Playing a pawn in this foolish game is one thing, but being insulted with minstrel show dialect... Okay. Was something racist on those clues? Are we going to see what they said? Because I want to see what they said. Please, Judge, please don't quit on me, Sandy pleaded. I have to give back all that money. It would break my wife's heart and my poor kids. Judge Ford regarded the desperate doorman without pity. So many had begged before her bench. Please, Judge, I lost my job, my pension. I can't fight no more. Don't quit just because of some nonsensical words. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me, she chanted as a child. Words did hurt, but she was no longer a child, nor a hanging judge. And there was always the chance... All right, Mr. McSuthers, I'll stay. J.J. Ford sat down, her eyes sparkling with wickedness, and we'll play the game just as Sam Westing would have played it. Mean. Flora Baumbach squeezed her eyes together and screwed up her face. She was concentrating. Have you memorized them yet? Turtle didn't like the way that Otis Amber's scrawny neck was swiveling high out of his collar. And what was Angela staring at? Yes, I think so, the dressmaker replied, but I can't make heads or tails of them. They make perfect sense to me, Turtle said. One by one, she put the clues in her mouth, chewed, and swallowed them. Gibberish, Mr. Who muttered. Grace Windsor Wexler agreed. Excuse me, Mr. Plum, but what are these clues to? I mean, exactly what are we supposed to find? Purple waves. Sandy joked with a wink at Turtle. Mrs. Wexler uttered a cry of recognition and changed the order of two of her clues. It's still gibberish, Mr. Who complained. Other players pressed the lawyer for more information. Ed Plum only shrugged. Then could you please give us copies of the will? A copy will be on file, Judge Ford began. I'm afraid not, Your Honor, the lawyer said. The will... He paused and tried again. The will not be filed until the first of the year. My instructions specifically state that no heir is allowed to see any of the documents until the game is over. No copy? That's not fair. But wait, they did have a copy. A shorthand copy. Sidel Pulaski had plenty of attention now. She smiled back at the friendly faces, revealing a lipstick stain on her front teeth. Isn't there some sort of last statement? Sandy asked Plum. I mean, like the intern says, nothing makes any sense. 11th. Senseless, you say? Death is senseless, and yet makes way for the living. Life, too, is senseless unless you know who you are, what you want, and which way the wind blows. So on with the game. The solution is simple if you know who you're looking for. But heirs beware. Be aware. Some are not who they say they are, and some are not who they seem to be. Whoever you are, it's time to go home. God bless you all, and remember this. Buy Westing Paper Products. Chapter 8. The Paired Heirs. During the night, Flora Baumbach's itsy-bitsy snowflakes raged into a blizzard. The tenants of Sunset Towers awoke from the clue-chasing, blood-dripping dreams, found in twisted sheets and imprisoned by 15-foot snowdrifts. No telephones, no electricity. Snowbound with a murderer. The slow procession looked like some sight of ancient, mysterious rite as partner sought out partner on the windowless stairs, and silent pairs threaded through the corridors in the flickering lights of crooked, color-striped candles, the product of Turtle's stint at summer camp. These handmade candles are both practical and romantic, she said, peddling her wares from apartment to the frightened tenants at 7 in the morning. Oh, it's only Turtle. And the colored stripes tell time, which is very handy if your electric clock stopped. Each stripe burns exactly 1/2 hour, more or less. 12 stripes, 6 hours. How much? Not wishing to take advantage of the emergency, I've reduced the price to only $5 each. Outrageous. Even more so when the electricity came on 2 hours after our last sale. Sorry, no refunds, Turtle said. No matter. What was $5 to heirs of an estate worth $200 million? Clues. They had to work on those clues. Behind closed doors. Whisper. Somebody may be listening. Not all the heirs were huddled in plotting, puzzle-solving pairs. Jake Wexler had retreated to his office after a long and loud argument with his wife. He sure could have used half of that $10,000, but he wouldn't admit it, not to her. Forfeited money upset her more than the murder of her uncle, if he was her uncle. 5 floors above, Jake's partner stood before the restaurant's front window, staring at the froth on the angry lake and beyond. Nobody had bothered to tell Madame Who about the Westing game. Other players were snowbound elsewhere. Denton Deer in the hospital, Sandy at home. No one gave a thought of where Otis, Amber, or Crow might be. But Sidel Pulaski was there, thumping her crutch against the baseboards as she limped through the carpeted halls in the arm of her pretty partner. Not one, but 7 tenants had invited her to morning coffee or afternoon tea. Murder or not, they had to see Pulaski's copy of that will. 3 lumps, please. Angela drinks it black. Your health? Thank the Lord I'm still able to hobble around. Your job? I was private secretary to the president of Schultz Sausages. Poor Mr. Schultz. I don't know how he'll manage to get on without me. Your shorthand notes? Thank you for the refreshments. I must hurry back from my medication. Come on, Angela. One heir had not invited them in, but that didn't stop Sadell Pulaski from barging into apartment 2D. Hi, Chris. Just thought we'd pop in to see how you're doing. Don't be scared. I'm not the murderer, Angela isn't the murderer, and I don't think that you're the murderer. Mind if I sit down? The secretary toppled into the next chair before the invalid could reply. Here, I stole a macaroon for you. It's so sticky you'll be tasting it all day. I must have 6 strands of coconuts between my upper molars. Chris took the cookie. Just look at that smile. It could break your heart. Angela wished her partner had not said that. It seemed so insensitive, so crude. But at least Sadell was talking to him, which is more than she was able to do. Angela, the fortunate one, standing like a dummy. I know Denton wants to work on the clues with you. He's snowbound too. You're How did pretty come out? He meant to say nice. Chris bent his curly head over the geography book in his lap. She wasn't laughing at him. It was all right to ask her because she was going to marry his partner. She didn't understand. Chris fanned the pages to the book to a picture of a wheat field. Grains. Oh, grains. You want to know the types of some grains? Let's see. There's wheat, rye, corn, barley, oats. Ugh! Angela thought the boy was going into a fit, but he was only repeating her last word. Oats. Sadell was puffing her warm breath on the window and wiping a frosted area clean with her sleeve. There, now you'll be able to watch the birds again. Anything else we can do for you, young man? Chris nodded. The pretty lady and the funny lady moved quickly to the door. One limped, but it was pretend limp. He could tell. Not like the limper of the Westinghouse lawn. Oats. Chris closed his eyes to picture the clues. 4, plain, grain, shed. Grain equals oats equals Otis Amber. 4 plus D from shed equals Ford. But neither the delivery boy nor the judge limped, and he still hadn't figured out she or plain. He'd have to wait for Denton Deer. Denton Deer was smart. He was a doctor. He's an intern, not a doctor. There's a difference. Chris raised his binoculars to the cliff. Windblown drifts buttressed the house. Something moved beyond the second floor, a hand holding back the edge of a drape. Slowly, the heavy drape fell back against the window. The Westinghouse was snowbound too, and somebody was snowbound in it. Da-da! Only one of the players thought the clues told how the $10,000 check was to be spent. Take stock in America, the will said. Go for broke, the will said. In the stock market, Turtle said. Whoever makes the most money wins it all. The whole $200 million. Their clues? C. Mountain. Am. O. They stood for symbols of 3 corporations listed on the stock exchange. SEA, MT, the abbreviation for mountain, and AMO. But AM and O are separate clues, Flora Bombeck said, to confuse us. But what about the murderer? I thought we were supposed to find the name of the murderer. To put us off track, if the police suspected murder, she'd be in jail by now. Her fingerprints were all over everything in the Westinghouse, including the corpse. You don't really think one of us could have killed a living, breathing human being in cold blood, do you think, Mrs. Bombeck? Do you? Turtle did, but the dressmaker was a cream puff. Don't you look at me like that, Turtle Wexler. You know very well I could never think such a thing. I must have misunderstood. Oh my, I just wish Miss Pulaski would show us a copy of the will. Turtle returned to her calculations, multiplying numbers of shares times price, adding a broker's commission, trying to total the sums to the $10,000 they had to spend. Flora Bombeck may have been wrong about the murderer, but she was not convinced about Turtle's plan. What about buy Westing paper products? I'm sure that was in the will. Great, Turtle exclaimed. We'll do just that. We'll add WPP to the list of stocks we're going to buy. Flora Bombeck had watched enough television commercials to know that buy Westing paper products meant that as soon as she could get to the market, she'd buy all the Westing products on the shelf. Still, it felt good having a child around again. She'd play along. Gladly. You know, Turtle, you may be right about putting our money in the stock market. Remember the will said, "May God thy gold refine." That must be from the Bible. Shakespeare, Turtle replied. All quotations were either from the Bible or Shakespeare. Looks like the Wexler household is just full of people who make ridiculous generalizations about everything. Mr. Hu moved aside a full ashtray with a show of distaste and rearranged the clues. Purple fruited makes more sense. Grace Wexler looked across the restaurant to the lone figure at the window. Are you sure your wife doesn't understand English? I mean, after living here so long? That's my second wife. She came over from Hong Kong 2 years ago. She does look young, but it's hard to tell ages of people of Oriental persuasion, Grace said. Why was he glaring at her like that? Your wife is quite lovely, so doll-like and inscrutable. That might be racist. Maybe. Who bit off half of a chocolate bar? He had enough problems with the empty restaurant, the lazy son, and his nagging ulcer, and now he had to put up with this bigot. Grace lit another cigarette and rearranged the clues to read Purple Waves. You heard that doorman say Purple Waves. It must mean something. And that ghastly secretary was wearing a dress with purple waves last night, not to mention the crush. You should not speak unkindly of those less fortunate than you, Hu said. You're quite right, Grace replied. I thought the poor thing handled her infirmity with great courage. Traveling mimosa, my future son-in-law said. He's a doctor, Anyhow, Pulaski couldn't possibly be the murderer, not the way she gimps around. Besides, how could my Uncle Sam know she'd wear purple waves to his funeral? Hu waved the cigarette smoke from his face. The murderer had to have a motive. How about this? A niece murders her rich uncle to inherit his money. Good sport that she was, Grace tossed back her head and uttered an amused ha ha ha. Not that I care, Hu said. That cheating moneybags got what he deserved. What's the matter? Look, Grace pointed to the clues. Fruited, purple, waves, 4C. 4C! The murderer lives in apartment 4C. I live in 4C, Hu barked. If Sam Westing wanted to say 4C, he would have written number 4, letter C. SEA means sea, like what a turtle swims in. Come on now, Mr. Hu, we're both being silly. Have you spoken to your son about his clues? Some son, if you can catch him, you can ask him. Hu stuffed the rest of the candy bar in his mouth. And some business I got here. Everybody orders up, nobody orders down. That coffee shop is sending me to the poorhouse. And your Angela and that Pulaski woman, they didn't show us the will. They didn't give us their clues. They didn't pay for the jasmine tea and 6 almond cookies, and you smoke too much. And you eat too much. Grace threw a coin purse on the table and stormed out of the restaurant. Change, that's all he'll get from her. He'd have to beg on his knees before she signed Grace Windsor Wexler on that $10,000 check, that madman. Some pair they make. Attila the Hun and Gracie the Useless. Gracie Windclopple Wexler. Heir pretender, pretentious heir. First the money. They signed their names to the check. Half would go to Doug's Who savings account, half would go to Theo's parents. Next, the clues. His, N, on, to, the, 4. Maybe they're numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, Theo guessed. I still say on is no, the board tractor said. He clapped his hand behind his head, leaned back in the coffee shop booth, and stretched his long legs under the opposite bench. And no is what we got. No real clues, no leads, no will. After 3 cups of coffee, 2 pastries, and a bowl of rice pudding with cream, Sidel Pulaski had offered nothing in return. Theo refused to give up. Are you sure you didn't see anything unusual at the Westing house that night? I didn't kill Westing, if that's what you mean. And the only unusual thing I saw was Turtle Wexler. I think that pest has fallen in love with me. How's that for luck? Get serious, Doug. One of the heirs is a murderer. We could all get killed. Just because somebody zapped the old man doesn't mean he's gonna kill again. Dad says... Doug paused. His father's comment about rewarding a killer with a medal might be incriminating. Theo tried another tack. I was playing chess with somebody in the game room last night. Who? That's what's strange. I don't know who. We'll have to find out which one of the heirs plays chess. Since when is chess playing evidence for murder? Well, it's something to go on, Theo replied. And another thing. The will said that no 2 sets of clues are alike. Maybe all the clues put together make one message, a message that points to the murderer. Somehow or other, we're gonna have to get the heirs to pool their clues. Oh, sure, the killer can't wait to hand over the clues that will hang him. Doug rose. So bad or not, he had to stay in shape for the track meet. For the rest of the day, he jogged through the hallways and up and down the stairs, scaring the nervous tenants half out of their wits. Judge J.J. Ford had no doubt that the clues she shared with the doorman were meant for her, but Sam Westing had toss off sharper insults than, oh great, you finally get to see what the racist slur on the cards was. Skies am shining brother. Okay, skies am okay, someone explain to me how that is racist, or even offensive, because there is no way that even makes something grammatically correct, let alone a racial slur. His choice of words may have been limited. Therefore, these clues were part of a longer statement. A statement that named a name. The name of the murderer. No, Westing couldn't have been killed. If his life had been threatened, if he had been in danger of any kind, he would have insisted on police protection. He owed the police. He owned the whole town. Sam Westing was not the type to let himself get killed. Not unless he was insane. The judge opened the envelope given to her by incompetent Plum, a certificate of sanity dated last week. Having thoroughly examined, keen mind and memory, excellent physical condition, signed, Sidney Sykes, M.D. Sykes, that sounded familiar. The judge scanned the obituary she had cut from Saturday's newspaper. Samuel W. Westing and his friend, Dr. Sidney Sykes, were involved in a near-fatal automobile accident. Both men were hospitalized with severe injuries. Sykes assumed his Westingtown medical practice was in the post of county coroner, while Westing disappeared from sight. Sykes was Westing's friend, and, she remembered, a witness to the will. But he was also a physician in good standing. He would accept his opinion on Westing's sanity, for the time being at least. Back to the clues. Look at her, the big-time judge, fussing over scraps of Westing's super-strength paper towels. Forget the clues, she said aloud, rising from her dress to putter about the room. Nibbling on a macaroon, she stacked the used coffee cups on a tray. If only that Pulaski person had let her study the will. That's where the real clues were buried, among the veiled threats and pompous promises, the slogans and silliness in that hodgepodge of a will. In his will, Sam Westing implied, he did not state, he implied, that 1. He was murdered. 2. The murderer was one of the heirs. 3. He alone knew the name of the murderer. And 4. The name of the murderer was the answer to the game. The game, a tricky, divisive Westing game. No matter how much fear and suspicion he instilled in the players, Sam Westing knew that greed would keep them playing the game. Until the murderer was captured and punished. Sam Westing was not murdered, but one of the heirs was guilty. Guilty of some offense against the relentless man. And that heir was in danger. From his grave, Westing would stalk his enemy, and through his heirs he would wreak his revenge. Which one? Which heir was a target of Westing's vindictiveness? In the name of justice, she would have to find Westing's victim before the others did. She would have to learn everything she could about each one of the heirs. Who are they, and how did their lives touch Miss Westing's? These 16 strangers whose only connection with one another was Sunset Towers. Sunset Towers, she start from there. Good, the telephones were working again. The number she dialed was answered on the first ring. Hi there, this is a recording of yours truly, Barney Northrup. I'm at your service. As soon as I get back to my office, that is. Just sing out your problem to old Barney when you hear the beep. Beep. J.J. Ford hung up without singing out her problem to old Barney. He, too, could be involved in Westing's plot. The newspaper, she would try the newspaper. Surely somebody was snowbound there. After 8 rings, a live voice answered. We usually don't supply that kind of information over the phone, but since it's you, Judge Ford, I'll be happy to oblige. To spell out the names, I'll call back if I can find anything. Thank you, I'd appreciate that. It was a beginning. Sam Westing was dead, but maybe, just once, she could beat him at his own game. His last game. Having found what she wanted in Turtle's desk, Angela returned to her frilly bedroom where Sidel Pulaski, glasses low on her nose, was perched on a ruffled stool on the vanity table, smearing blue shadow on her eyelids. First, let's tackle our own clues, the secretary said, frowning at the result in the threefold mirror. Unlucky from the day she was born. Now she had a beautiful and well-loved partner. There was always the chance that they alone had been given the answer. She unsealed the envelope and held it out to Angela. Take one. Angela removed the first clue. Good. Now it was Sidel's turn. Glory be! She exclaimed, thinking that she found the name of a murderer. Her thumb was covering the letter D. The word was Hood. Angela's turn. The third clue was from. Sidel's turn. The fourth clue was spacious. The fifth and last clue was Angela uttered a low groan. Her hand shook as she passed the paper to her partner. The fifth and last clue was Grace. Grace, that's her mother's name, isn't it? Sidel said. Well, don't worry. The clue doesn't mean your mother is the murderer. The will says it's not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. The secretary had not yet transcribed the shorthand, but she read it through several times before handing the notebook in a safe place. By the way, are you really related to Mr. Westing? Angela shrugged. Sidel assumed that meant no and turned to the clues. Good, Grace, from, Hood, spacious. The only thing I can figure out from these clues is good Grace from spacious Hood. As soon as the parking lot is shoveled out, we'll peek under the hoods of all the cars. A map or some clues may be hidden there. Maybe even the murder weapon. Now let's hear about the other clues. Angela reported on the clues gathered in the game room and today's comings and goings. King, Queen. Otis Amber said King Otis and Queen Crow. Purple waves. The others switched the 2 clues around with Sandy mentioned that. On, or no. Doug and Theo couldn't decide whether the clue was right side up or upside down. Grains. Chris Theodorakis thinks this clue refers to Otis Amber. You know, grains, oats. MT. Angela showed her partner the crumpled scrap paper she had picked up along with Siddell's dropped crutch during Flora Baumbach's tea party. 50 shares of MT at $6. $3,000. No, it's 500 shares MT at $6. $3,000. Broker's commission plus 90. $3,090. I checked Turtle's diary. She's not following any stock with a symbol like MT, so I'm guessing it's one of her clues. MT could either be mountain or empty. Excellent, Siddell Pulaski remarked. Her partner was beautiful, but not dumb. Read all the clues together now. Good, hood, from, spacious, grace, king, queen, purple, waves, on, or no, grains, mountain, or empty. Siddell was disappointed. It's not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. And what we don't have is a verb. Nothing makes sense without a verb. What about the judge? Judge Ford thought the clues were an insult, and she said something about being a pawn in Westing's game. And she had a clipping of the obituary on her desk. This obituary. Angela handed Siddell the newspaper taken from Turtle's drawer. What's that? It was a knock from the front door. It was footsteps in the living room. It was Theo. Anyone for a game of chess? He asked, leaning through the bedroom doorway. No, thank you, Siddell replied, looking very busy. Theo smiled shyly at Angela and left. Siddell read the obituary in Turtle's newspaper. The words $200 million were underlined, but she found a more interesting item. Sam Westing was a master at chess. No wonder Theo's so interested. Do you know anything about chess, Angela? A little, she replied slowly, putting the pieces in order. The judge says she's a pawn, and Otis Amber says he's a king, Crow's the queen. Oh well, it's probably just a coincidence. We can't leave any stone unturned, Siddell insisted, and the will says, object of the game, to win. What did you say? Object of the game, to win. How about object of the game, twin? Maybe the murderer is a twin. Twin! Siddell liked that. The only problem would be getting the murderer to admit that he or she is a twin. Let's get back to my apartment. It's time I transcribe those notes. Angela helped the invalid to her feet and nervously peered in both directions before stepping into the hallway. Siddell chuckled at her timidity. There's nothing to be scared of, Angela. Westing was murdered for his money, and we're not rich yet. We won't be rich enough to be murdered until we find the name. By the time we get the money from the estate, the murderer will be locked up in jail. In spite of the impeccable logic, Angela looked back over her shoulder several times on the way to 3C. Strange. Siddell stood before her open apartment door. She'd slammed it shut on leaving, but had not locked it with the deadbolt. After all, not even a burglar could get into a snowbound building. Unless... Angela, too frightened to notice that Siddell ran through the apartment with her crutch in the air, found her partner in the bathroom frantically tossing soiled towels from the hamper. Siddell Pulaski stared at the bare wicker bottom, then sank to the rim of the bathtub, shaking her head in disbelief. Somebody at Sunset Towers had stolen the shorthand notebook. Well, that's the burglar. We still have yet to meet the bomber, the bookie, or the mistake. Chapter 9. Lost and Found. Early the next morning, a typed index card was tacked onto the elevator's back wall. Lost. Important business papers of no value to anybody but the owner. Please return to Siddell Pulaski 3C. No questions asked. Yeah, that's not suspicious at all. The shorthand notebook was not returned, but the idea of a bulletin board was an instant success. By late afternoon, the elevator was papered with notices and filled with tenants facing sideways and backwards, reading as they rode up and down. Lost. Silver cross and filigree chain, topaz pin and earrings, gold-filled cufflinks. Return to Grace Windsor Wexler 3D. Reward. All players willing to discuss sharing their clues come to the coffee shop tomorrow at 10 a.m. Whoever stole my Mickey Mouse clock better give it back. Just leave it in the hall in front of apartment 3D when no one's looking. Turtle Wexler. Order down, not up. Or come on to the 5th floor to dine in elegance at Shin Hu's restaurant, specializing in exquisite Chinese cuisine. Lost. String of pearls, sentimental value. If found, please bring them to apartment 2C. Thank you, Flora Baumbach. Dressmaking and alterations reasonably priced. Found. 6 clues. The following clues, printed on squares of Westing toilet tissue, were found in the third world hallway. Braiding, kicking tortoise, a brat. I'm having an informal party this evening from 8 o'clock on. You're all invited. Please come. J.J. Ford, apartment 4D. Turtle, wherever you are, be home at 7:30 sharp. Your loving mother. Mom, I'm home. No one else was. On reading Mrs. Wexler's note on the elevator, Flora Baumbach had insisted, "You must do what your mother said," when Turtle replied, "Like showing her our clues?" Flora Baumbach's answer was, "Perhaps so. After all, she is your mother." Flora Baumbach was sappy, always smiling that same dumb smile, always so polite to everybody, and so timid. When they finally reached a snowbound broker, Flora Baumbach was so nervous she dropped the telephone. Turtle had to admit to some nervousness herself. It was her first real order she'd ever placed. For a minute there, she thought she might choke on the thumping heart that had jumped into her throat, but she had pulled off the transaction like a pro. Now, if only the stock market would go off, she'd show Mr. Wessing about refining gold. The next part of the will would read, "Whichsoever pair made the most money with $10,000 inherit the whole estate." She was sure of it. Again with the weird generalizations. "Oh, there you are." Grace Wexler acted as if Turtle was the tardy one, but she quickly sweetened. "Come, dear, let's go to your room and fix your hair." Her mother sat behind her on the edge of the narrow bed, loosened her dark brown hair, and brushed it to a gloss. She had not done that with such care in a long, long time. "Have you eaten?" Mrs. Baumbach made me dinner. Turtle felt the fingers dividing the hair into strands. Her mother was so warm, so close. Your poor father's probably starving. He's been so busy on the phone, changing appointments and all. Daddy's eating at the coffee shop. I just saw him there." Turtle dashed in shouting, "The braiding, kicking tortoise strikes again!" and kicked a surprised Theo in the shin. It was Doug Who, not Theo, who had made the sign. Her mother twisted the 3 strands into a braid. "I think you should wear your party dress tonight. You look so pretty in pink." Pretty? She had never used that word before, not about her. What's going on? "You know, sweetheart, I'm rather hurt that you won't tell your own mother about the clues." So that was it. She should have known. "Yep." "My lips are sealed," Turtle said defiantly. "Just one eensy-beensy clue?" Grace wheedled, winding a rubber band around the end of the braid. Turtle replied through sealed lips. Angela came into the small room and tugged Turtle's braid. Only her sister could get away with that. Beaming on her favorite, Grace took her hand and then gasped, "Angela, where's your engagement ring? I have a rash on my finger." Thump, thump. Sidel Pulaski appeared in the doorway. "Hi, what's everybody doing in the closet?" "See, I told you this is a closet," Turtle said. Grace ignored the complaint. It did no good being nice to that ungrateful child, never satisfied, always whining about something or other. "Oh, hello, Miss Pulaski." "I've been feeling a bit weakly, thank you, but nothing can keep me from a party." Sidel's crutch was painted in black and white squares to match her black and white checkered dress. Her large hoop earrings were also black and white. The white one dangled from her left ear, the black from her right. "The party is such a lovely idea," Grace said, warming up to the owner of the shorthand notes. "When I saw the invitation in the elevator, I suggested to Mr. Who that he call the judge and see if she needed hors d'oeuvres, and sure enough, he got an order for 6 dozen. She turned to Angela. "And you better get dressed, dear. It's getting late. Too bad Dr. D can't escort you to the party, but your father and I will take you. Angela and I are going together. We're partners, you know." Sidel had it all planned. They were to appear in identical costumes. Tonight was the night if they discovered if one of the heirs was a twin. "I'm going to the party with Mrs. Baumbach," Dora remarked. "The sign said that everybody's invited." Again, Grace ignored her. "By the way, Miss Pulaski, I hope you changed your mind about showing me your notes." It was the secretary's turn to seal her lips. She wouldn't put it past the uppity Grace Windsor Wexler to steal the notebook from an unfortunate cripple and then rub it in. Grace tried again, her voice dripping with honey. "You know, of course, if I do win the inheritance, everything I own goes to Angela." Turtle bounded up. "Let me out of here. A person can't breathe in this closet." She kicked the bed, kicked the chair, kicked the desk, and then elbowed past the disapproving secretary. "What in the world is wrong with that child?" her mother said. Judge Ford was instructing Theo in the art of bartending when the telephone rang. The snowbound newspaperman had found several items in the files. First, the engagement announcement of Angela Wexler to Denton Deere. Next, several clippings on a lawsuit brought out against Sam Westing by an inventor named... Hold on, please. Mr. Who waddled in with a large tray of appetizers. The judge pointed him to the serving buffet and apologized to her caller. "I'm sorry, would you repeat that name?" "James Who." He claimed Westing stole his idea of the disposable paper diaper. "1 minute, please." Then Judge cupped her hand over the mouthpiece. "Please don't leave, Mr. Who. I was hoping you'd stay for the party. As a guest, of course. Your wife and your son, too." Who grunted. He hated parties, and he'd seen his fill of people eating and drinking, acting like clowns, jabbering like... So that's it. Jabbering. Dropping clues. "I'll be right back." The receiver hissed with an impatient sigh, and the researcher went on. "I got a thick file of sports items on the other Who, Doug Who. Seems to run a pretty fast mile for a high school kid. That's all I could find of the names he gave me, but I still have stacks of Westing's clippings to go through. Thank you so much. The doorbell rang. The party was about to begin. Well, that was a long one. Who would have known that the three longest chapters in the book would be right next to each other? Alright, see you next time for part 4.